A distress call and an unlikely encounter. Dr. Elaine Carter leaned back in her chair, staring at the blinking screen in the medbay of the neutral medical ship Sanctuary. Her third cup of synth coffee sat forgotten beside her, its faint steam curling in the air. The ship had been orbiting the edges of contested space for weeks, offering aid to anyone desperate or bold enough to ask. Most of the time, it was human soldiers or smaller alien factions caught in the crossfire. The larger, prouder empires rarely lowered themselves to request help. That's why the incoming distress call was so strange. "Dr. Carter," Commander Hayes called from the comms console, his voice tight. "You might want to see this." Elaine set the datapad down and strode across the medbay. Hayes gestured at the flickering hologram above the console, a garbled transmission, the voice distorted but still clear enough to make out. Eronian vessel requesting immediate medical assistance. Life support critical. Multiple casualties. Coordinates transmitted. Elaine's heart skipped a beat. Erons, known for their warlike nature and disdain for humanity, they had never been seen as allies. The idea of them asking for help was almost unthinkable. "Are we sure this isn't a trap?" she asked, narrowing her eyes at the hologram. "It's possible," Hayes admitted, "but their ship's identification codes check out. It's an Eronian royal vessel." Elaine took a deep breath. Neutrality was the cornerstone of Sanctuary's mission. The crew had sworn to help anyone in need, no matter their origin. Still, the risk loomed large in her mind. "Prep the shuttle," Elaine said at last, her voice firm, "and load the trauma kits. If they're sending a distress call, it must be bad." The shuttle docked with the Eronian ship amid an eerie silence. The vessel's once pristine silver hull was scarred with scorch marks, and the faint glow of emergency lights flickered ominously. Elaine led a team of medics through the airlock, her senses on high alert. Inside, chaos reigned. Wires hung like vines from the ceiling, sparks showering the wreckage. The acrid stench of burnt metal filled the air. Bodies, both Eronian and unrecognizable, lay scattered across the floor. "Spread out," Elaine instructed, her voice calm despite the grim scene. "Scan for survivors." As her team moved methodically through the debris, Elaine's scanner beeped faintly. She followed the signal to a collapsed section of the corridor. Kneeling, she pushed aside a jagged metal beam, revealing an Eronian male lying motionless beneath it. He was breathtaking, even in this state. His silver skin shimmered faintly under the emergency lights, marred by bruises and cuts. Black tattoos curled across his face and arms like intricate works of art. His breathing was shallow, and a deep gash along his side stained his tunic with luminescent blue blood. Elaine's pulse quickened as his golden eyes flickered open. "Human," he rasped, his voice weak but laced with suspicion. "I'm here to help," Elaine said gently, running her scanner over his injuries. "You're badly hurt. Can you move?" He shook his head faintly, grimacing in pain. "No, leave me." "Not an option," she replied, her tone resolute. "You're coming with me." The other Erons nearby stirred at the sound of her voice. They murmured in their language, one word rising above the others. "Xeric." Elaine's translator chip buzzed faintly before providing the interpretation. "Royalty." Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just any survivor. This was someone important. Very important. "Dr. Carter," one of her medics called from behind her. "We've got incoming. Armed Eronian soldiers, a dozen meters down." Elaine glanced at her patient, whose golden eyes were now wide with alarm. The faintest hint of a smile tugged at his lips despite his condition. "Seems you're in as much danger as I am, human," he murmured. Elaine ignored the knot of fear forming in her chest and turned to her team. "Get him on a stretcher. We're leaving. Now." The team worked quickly, securing the injured Eronian, while Elaine kept her eyes on the corridor, the distant sound of boots growing louder. "Move," she shouted as the medics hoisted the stretcher and began their retreat to the shuttle. Elaine stayed close to her patient, her thoughts racing. This mission had just gone from a medical emergency to something far more dangerous and far more personal. The shuttle's engines roared to life as it pulled away from the Eronian vessel. Elaine glanced at her patient, who was unconscious now, his breathing shallow but steady. "Who are you?" she whispered to herself, her mind swirling with questions. She didn't know it yet, but saving this stranger would change her life and the fate of 2 civilizations forever. Healing across borders. The medbay aboard Sanctuary was a controlled chaos of noise and movement as the medical team worked to stabilize the injured Eronian. Dr. Elaine Carter stood at the head of the stretcher, barking orders while scanning his vitals. The glowing blue blood trickling from his side was a stark reminder of how alien he truly was. "Vitals dropping," one of the nurses called. "His oxygen levels are plummeting." Elaine frowned, gripping her scanner tighter. "Get the xenobiotic stabilizer online. His physiology won't respond to human methods. We need something adaptable." As the nurse complied, Elaine leaned closer to her patient. His tattoos seemed to pulse faintly, as if responding to the stress coursing through his body. She'd seen plenty of alien species in her career, but nothing quite like this. "Hold on," she murmured. "I didn't drag you out of there just to lose you now." The stabilizer hummed to life, injecting adaptive compounds designed to mimic the unique biochemical responses of different species. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then his vitals began to climb, slowly but steadily. Elaine exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Good. Keep monitoring him. I'll scrub in for surgery." Her assistant, Nurse Kira, hesitated. "Dr. Carter, this is risky. Eronian physiology is uncharted territory. Their tissue and cellular makeup air." "I know," Elaine interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "But we don't have a choice. If we don't act now, he won't make it." Kira nodded, and Elaine disappeared into the scrub room. The surgery was grueling. Eronian biology was as intricate as it was foreign. Elaine worked with a precision born of years of experience, guiding the team through procedures that felt as much like discovery as medicine. His internal organs shimmered faintly, their delicate structure both beautiful and daunting. "Nanostitchers ready," Elaine said, glancing at the tray of micro-repair drones. "Activate them at minimal output. His tissue density could overload their processors." Kira complied, and the nanostitchers went to work, repairing the gash along his side and sealing internal damage. Sweat dripped down Elaine's brow as she monitored the process. Every second felt like a gamble. Finally, the last of the wounds closed. His breathing stabilized, his vitals leveling out into something that resembled normal. Elaine stepped back, her chest rising and falling heavily. "It's done," she said, exhaustion in her voice. "Now we wait." Hours later, Elaine sat at his bedside, watching the steady rhythm of his chest rising and falling. The rest of the medbay was quiet now, the team having moved on to other patients. But Elaine couldn't leave him. Not yet. The faintest movement caught her attention. His golden eyes fluttered open, disoriented but clear. "You're awake," Elaine said softly, leaning forward. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he rasped, "You saved me." Elaine nodded. "You're lucky we got to you in time. Your injuries were severe." He studied her face, his expression unreadable. "Why would a human risk so much for me?" Her brow furrowed. "Because you needed help. That's all the reason I need." A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're different from the others." "Maybe," she said, her voice calm but guarded. "But right now, what matters is your recovery. Can you tell me your name?" He hesitated before speaking. "Erin." Elaine noted the name, the syllables rolling off her tongue in an unfamiliar way. "Erin, do you know who attacked your ship?" His expression darkened, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Sabotage." From within. Elaine's stomach churned. "Someone from your own crew." "Not crew," he corrected. Family. The weight of the word hung in the air between them. Elaine felt a pang of unease. This wasn't just an ordinary rescue. There were layers of intrigue and danger here she couldn't yet fathom. I don't understand, she said carefully. Why would your family? They see me as a threat, Erin interrupted, his voice steady despite his weariness. My father, he is the Emperor. I am his son, but I am also his mistake. Elaine frowned. Mistake. Erin's eyes softened, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in his gaze. I was born of a union that defied our laws. My existence is a reminder of his transgression. There are those who believe I should never have been born, let alone allowed to live. Elaine's chest tightened at his words. But you're his son. That doesn't matter in the Eronian Empire, Erin said bitterly. Bloodlines are everything. Purity above all. My very presence threatens the balance of power. Elaine leaned back, her mind racing. This wasn't just a political scandal. It was a personal tragedy wrapped in centuries of cultural rigidity. And now she was caught in the middle of it. We'll protect you, she said, her voice firm despite the weight of the situation. Sanctuary is neutral territory. No one can harm you here. Erin's lips twitched in a faint smile. You're brave, for a human. And you're stubborn, for an alien, she shot back, a hint of a grin breaking through her seriousness. For the first time, Erin laughed, a soft, tired sound that carried the faintest echo of hope. But as Elaine looked at him, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. A growing connection. Dr. Elaine Carter found herself spending more time at Erin's bedside than she intended. Though his recovery was progressing, the weight of his situation lingered in the air, drawing her back to check on him more often than protocol required. At least, that's what she told herself. How are you feeling today? She asked as she adjusted the monitors beside him. Erin was propped up slightly on the medbay bed, his silvery skin regaining its shimmer and his golden eyes sharper with each passing day. He looked at her, his expression softer than it had been in their earlier conversations. Better, he said, his voice still raspy but steady. Thanks to you. Elaine offered a small smile. You're the one doing the hard part. Healing. I'm just helping where I can. Erin's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable. You do more than help. You give without asking for anything in return. It's rare. Elaine paused, caught off guard by the intensity of his tone. She busied herself with adjusting his IV, avoiding his piercing stare. It's just how I was trained, she said lightly. I don't pick sides. I just save lives. But why? He pressed. Your species has every reason to hate mine. Yet you risk your life, your ship, your crew, to save someone who, by all accounts, is your enemy. Elaine hesitated, her hands pausing mid-motion. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. Because I've seen what hate can do. It consumes people, destroys them. If I let that guide me, I'd be no better than the ones who cause all this suffering. For a moment, Erin didn't respond. Then, a faint smile tugged at his lips. You're wiser than most of your kind. And you're not what I expected, she replied, her tone softer. Erin tilted his head, curiosity lighting his golden eyes. What did you expect? Arrogance, coldness, a disdain for humanity. She gave a small shrug. Not someone, thoughtful, or kind. His smile deepened, though there was a shadow behind it. We are not all as the galaxy sees us, just as not all humans are as noble as you. As the days passed, Elaine and Erin's conversations grew longer, their connection deepening. She learned about his life, the burdens of being a prince born of a forbidden union, and the constant shadow of betrayal that loomed over him. In turn, she shared pieces of her own story. How she joined the Federation Medical Corps after losing her brother in an alien attack, how she devoted herself to saving lives instead of taking them. One evening, as she sat by his bedside, Their talk drifted into quieter, more personal territory. "You must miss your home," Elaine said, watching his face carefully. Aaron's gaze turned distant. "I've never truly had one. My father's palace was grand, but it was not home. Too many eyes watching. Too many whispers in the halls." Elaine nodded, her chest tightening at the sadness in his tone. "That sounds lonely." "It was," he admitted. "But here, with you." He trailed off, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "It feels different. Like I'm not just a burden. Like I matter." Elaine felt a blush rise to her cheeks, and she quickly looked away, focusing on her datapad. "Well, that's because you do matter. You're not just some patient to me." Aaron leaned forward slightly, despite the protest of his recovering body. "Then what am I to you, Elaine?" Her heart skipped a beat. She turned to face him, unsure how to answer. The air between them felt charged, the lines of professionalism blurring with each passing second. "You're," she began, but the words caught in her throat. Before she could finish, the medbay door hissed open. Nurse Kira stepped inside, her expression urgent. "Dr. Carter, we have a problem," she said, glancing warily at Aaron. "An Eronian strike vessel just entered the system. They're demanding we hand over their property." Elaine's stomach sank. She turned back to Aaron, whose expression had hardened into a mask of calm. "They've found me," he said quietly, his voice tinged with resignation. Elaine squared her shoulders, determination flaring in her chest. "They're not taking you." Aaron's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across his face. "Elaine, you can't." "I can," she interrupted, her voice firm. "You're my patient, and I don't abandon my patients." For the first time, Aaron looked at her with something deeper than gratitude, something closer to awe. "You're remarkable," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Elaine's resolve only strengthened. "Let's focus on keeping you safe. We'll figure the rest out later." As Kira stepped back into the hall to relay orders, Elaine met Aaron's gaze one last time. The unspoken promise between them hung heavy in the air. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The Empire strikes back. The hum of the sanctuary's engines was drowned out by the tension in the medbay. Dr. Elaine Carter stood beside Aaron's bed, her mind racing as Nurse Kira returned with an update. "The Eronian strike vessel is hailing us again," Kira said, her voice low. "They're demanding immediate compliance. They claim Aaron is an Imperial fugitive." Elaine glanced at Aaron, whose golden eyes were calm but alert. The faint lines of tension at the corners of his mouth betrayed his unease. "They won't leave without you," Elaine murmured. "And I doubt they'll take no for an answer." Aaron gave a faint, humorless smile. "They won't. My father's orders, or at least what they claim are his orders, leave no room for compromise." Elaine straightened her shoulders, her resolve hardening. "We're a neutral medical ship. They can't just storm in here and take you. We'll buy time and figure out how to handle this." The medbay doors hissed open moments later, and Captain Work entered, his jaw tight with tension. "Dr. Carter," he said without preamble, "I just spoke to their commander. They're giving us 1 hour to hand over the prince, or they'll consider us hostile." Elaine bristled. "Hostile? We're a medical vessel. They know that's a violation of intergalactic law." Rourke's grim expression didn't soften. "They don't care. And frankly, I can't risk the safety of this ship and everyone aboard for one patient, prince or not." Elaine stepped closer, her voice firm. "He's not just a patient. He's someone they tried to kill. If we hand him over, it's a death sentence." Rourke rubbed his temples. "I understand your position, Doctor, but this is a military matter now. My duty is to the ship." Aaron, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Captain, if I leave willingly, will they spare your ship?" Elaine whirled to face him. "No, that's not an option. They'll kill you, Aaron." Aaron's calm gaze met hers. "And if I stay, they might kill us all." The standoff was broken by the sound of the ship-wide alert system. Kira's voice came over the intercom. "Captain Rourke, the Eronian vessel has deployed shuttles. They're on an intercept course." Rourke cursed under his breath. "They're not waiting for the hour." Typical. He looked at Elaine. "You have 20 minutes. Figure something out." Elaine wasted no time. She turned to Aaron, her mind working quickly. "Can you walk?" He nodded. "I'll manage." "Good," Elaine said. "We need to get you off the medbay grid. If they board the ship, it'll be the first place they search." Aaron's brow furrowed. "And where do you suggest I hide?" "They'll tear this ship apart." Elaine met his gaze, a flicker of determination in her eyes. "The engineering bay. It's shielded, and the crew can seal it off. We'll hide you there while the captain negotiates." Elaine and Aaron moved swiftly through the ship's dim corridors, accompanied by Nurse Kira and 2 security officers. Aaron leaned on Elaine for support, though his steps grew stronger with each passing moment. "You're risking a lot for me," Aaron said quietly, his voice tinged with gratitude. Elaine glanced at him. "I told you, I don't abandon my patients. Besides," she hesitated, then added, "you're worth saving." Aaron's golden eyes softened, a quiet intensity passing between them. "Elaine, if we survive this, I want to." "Not the time," she interrupted, though a faint blush rose to her cheeks. "Let's get through the next 20 minutes first." They reached the engineering bay, just as the ship shuddered with the impact of Eronian shuttles docking. Elaine turned to the security officers. "Seal the bulkhead. No one gets in without my approval." "Yes, Doctor," one of them said, moving to the controls. As the door slid shut, Aaron sagged against the wall, his breath shallow but steady. Elaine crouched beside him, her hand brushing his arm. "We'll keep you safe, Aaron." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I believe you, but this won't end here. They'll keep coming. Then we'll keep fighting," she said simply. The intercom crackled to life. Captain Rourke's voice came through, tense and clipped. "Dr. Carter, the Eronian boarding party is demanding to search the medbay. I've stalled them, but they're getting impatient." Elaine pressed the comm button. "Hold them off as long as you can. We're securing the patient." Rourke's reply was grim. "You've got 10 minutes. After that, I can't promise anything." Elaine turned back to Aaron. "We're running out of time." His expression hardened, a flicker of the regal authority she'd come to recognize in him. "Then we make a stand." Elaine's heart raced as she met his gaze. "You mean fight?" "If they find me, they'll kill anyone who helped me," Aaron said. "We can't let them have that chance." Elaine hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Then we hold the line." With the echoes of footsteps growing louder in the halls, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test their resolve and their connection like never before. Love and legacy. The ship shuddered again as Eronian soldiers breached the outer hull, their heavy footsteps echoing down the corridors like the drumbeat of an impending storm. Dr. Elaine Carter stood in the engineering bay, her pulse pounding as she watched Aaron steady himself against the wall. Despite his injuries, his posture was regal, his golden eyes resolute. "They'll reach us soon," Nurse Kira whispered, her voice trembling. Elaine placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm. If we panic, they win." Aaron's gaze swept over the room. "You've done more than enough for me. If they find me here, surrender. Tell them I forced you to help. It's the only way to keep your crew safe." Elaine rounded on him, her eyes blazing. "You think I'd hand you over to them after everything we've been through? Not a chance." His expression softened, but there was a quiet anguish in his voice. "Elaine, this fight isn't yours." "Wrong," she said firmly. "You're not just a patient anymore. You're someone who matters to me." Aaron's eyes widened slightly, but before he could respond, the door to the engineering bay rattled violently. The Eronian soldiers had found them. The bulkhead groaned under the pressure of the attackers' tools, sparks flying as the metal began to give way. Elaine's mind raced. They needed more time. "Seal off the auxiliary conduits," she told Kira. "It'll delay them a little longer." Kira nodded and hurried to the control panel. Aaron stepped closer to Elaine, his voice low but urgent. "You're risking everything for me." She turned to him, her face inches from his. "I know, and I'd do it again." Something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged not just in the chaos of survival, but in trust and something deeper. Aaron reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. "Elaine," he began, but the bulkhead gave a deafening groan, interrupting him. The door would fall any second. Elaine turned to the small group of crew members gathered in the room. "When they come through, hold your ground. Don't let them take him." "And what about you?" Kira asked. Elaine glanced at Aaron. "We'll figure it out." The door finally gave way, and the first wave of Eronian soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised. Aaron stepped forward, raising his hands. "Stop," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority. The soldiers froze, startled by the force of his tone. "You dare violate the sanctity of a neutral vessel to capture me," Aaron continued, his golden eyes blazing. "Do you even understand the implications of your actions? If the Emperor learns of this, you'll answer to him personally." The soldiers hesitated, their rigid discipline cracking under the weight of his words. Their leader, a tall man with dark tattoos curling across his face, stepped forward. "The Emperor ordered your capture, Aaron. Do not pretend you have his favor." Aaron squared his shoulders, his presence commanding despite his weakened state. "And yet I live, while you serve the whims of traitors." The tension in the room was palpable. Elaine stepped beside Aaron, her voice calm but firm. "You heard him. He's under our protection, and this ship is neutral territory. If you take him, you risk war with the Federation." The leader's gaze flicked to Elaine, his sneer evident. "Human arrogance. You think your words hold weight here?" Before Elaine could respond, Aaron spoke again, his voice colder this time. "If you harm her, you'll have more than the Federation to answer to. You'll have me." Elaine's breath caught, the gravity of his words sending a ripple through the room. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken. The standoff stretched, the air thick with tension. Finally, the leader growled, "This isn't over. The Emperor will hear of this." He motioned for his men to retreat, their departure marked by the hiss of the damaged bulkhead ceiling behind them. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. Elaine turned to Aaron, her heart racing. "You did it. You made them believe." "For now," Aaron said, his voice weary. "They'll return. This was just a warning." Elaine stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "Then we'll be ready." He looked at her, his golden eyes softening. "You're remarkable, Elaine. I've never met anyone like you." She smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "And I've never met anyone like you, Aaron." For a moment, the chaos and danger of their situation faded, leaving only the unspoken connection between them. Aaron reached out, his hand cupping her face. "You've given me more than my life back. You've given me hope." Elaine's breath hitched, her heart pounding as she leaned into his touch. "You've shown me there's more to the galaxy than I thought possible." Their moment was interrupted by Kira's voice. "Dr. Carter, Captain Rourke wants an update." Elaine nodded, stepping back reluctantly. "Tell him we're secure for now." Kira left, and Elaine turned back to Aaron. "This isn't over, but whatever happens, we'll face it together." Aaron's lips curved into a faint smile. Together. As they stood there, the flickering lights of the medbay casting soft shadows, Elaine knew their story was just beginning. Together, they would defy the odds, challenge empires, and prove that even in the darkest of times, love and humanity could shine brightest of all.